How's everybody doing? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Well, we were going to start off. Somebody had a question from last time, but I don't see him here. Uh, Anybody have anything they'd like to start off with? Danielle's been busy in the group. I hope you guys have,
Mhm.
and Elaine, I hope you guys have been seeing their contributions. A lot of,
Yes. Thank you, Danielle. I really
Pleasure.
enjoy
Thank
your
you.
writing and, how you express everything. And it just, it makes my heart happy. So thank you.
Thank you. It's such a
Mhm.
pleasure. It just flows out of me and I'm done with hiding it. I'm just going to
Yes,
share.
that's beautiful.
Thank
And
you.
it's surely nothing to hide. I really enjoy it. So,
Thank
isn't it,
you.
isn't it funny how our egos decide what's worth hiding or sharing or censoring and suppressing?
it's crazy. I was looking at some pictures that I had done in college, drawn, and I was showing them to a coworker who does framing. And I just skipped over one of them and she's like, "Wait, what's this?" And she actually found a lot of value in it. And I just thought, "Oh, well, she probably doesn't want to see that one." And it was beautiful, but I just already had this pre idea, like, you don't need to see that one, just wow. A story, I guess, that was wrong.
Well, we have these distortions, and we do the same thing with some of the best qualities of ourselves,
Oh, God.
and then we call them our shadow, and we hide them and suppress them, and then you start sharing these things and saying them, and you're like, wait, what? You don't hate me? You're not gonna annihilate me? Wait, this is actually helping you? Wait, what?
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah, I something that Danielle said last week really struck a chord with me, which is how when I share something, when in the past when I've shared something that I'm really afraid to share, and I'm like worried how that other person is gonna perceive it or receive it or judge me. So many times I share, and then it ends up being like an incredibly expansive experience for the both of us, and it's almost never has turned out to be like the big scary story that I build it up to be in my head. And this week, one thing that I did that was similar to that is I was like experiencing so many emotions and feelings, and I was up at like 3 in the morning with all of these like thoughts just ruminating in my mind. And I was able to channel it into this poem. And I don't really write poetry typically, but it just was like coming out of me. And it was all about this relationship that I've been having with this person. And then I decided to share it with them, which is just like, wow,
Oh
it
yeah.
felt very vulnerable, very vulnerable. And so I shared it with them. And then I didn't hear from them. We were like just sending voice notes to each other. And so I didn't hear from them for a couple of days. And I was like, oh,
Oh,
are they thinking, is it too much? Are they thinking like, wow, this lady is nuts? Like, and then they responded and they were like, wow, thank you for sharing that with me. And it's just spurred on even more connection and conversation between us. And it was for me like it's just helping me train my vulnerability muscle or like helping me, yeah, just like get more practice with authentically sharing and expressing. And I know that also, like, the thing is, I received positive feedback from my art, which is so nice. Like, I love that. Of course, I want positive, or there's a part of me that wants positive feedback. So I was kind of like hearing and receiving that positive feedback and feeling so nourished by it. But I was also like, okay, this doesn't always happen when I'm vulnerable. Like sometimes being vulnerable and being real will push people away. They won't like what I have to say or what I'm expressing. And that's okay too. But it's been really nice for me to experience the fun part of it, which is getting positive feedback when I share and express myself authentically.
Yeah, that's
Neve,
go ahead.
I want to hear Neva's music. Where do we find your music? You're an artist, right?
Yes, yes, but I haven't recorded like professionally. But when I do, I will absolutely let you know and I'll share.
Thanks.
We got another artist here, don't we? Musician. Are you gonna speak up or are you gonna
Me, I'm singer-songwriter, musician as well.
Amazing. Where do we find your music?
If you just look up my name, Hannah Bethel, you can find it on Spotify or YouTube.
she's
I got some videos.
she's kind of a big deal. She's an award-winning musician and
Wow.
she was
Wow.
Grammy considered. So
Wow.
yeah.
Thank you.
And so
Definitely have to look you up.
yeah, she's really good. And you, and you know me. I'm not gonna lie. All right. Hi, Joy. Hi, David. Mauricio. Oops. Got a little message from Megan. All right. No worries. Thanks for stopping in. All right. Anybody? Anything else to share? Mauricio, go for it.
Thanks, Andrew. So, yes, I'm enjoying your book in this second reading. So, can you please elaborate a bit on how the energy flows when we don't have any purpose? Because once you heal, you say in the book that if you don't have a purpose or anything like that, the energy flows back to the stories and to these things as opposed to flow to our purpose. So we need a purpose so that the energy goes to that place. So can you elaborate a bit on that, please?
Yeah. So specifically in the book, I talk about vision, right? Having a vision, having a place for that energy to go. So let's say for people, Megan actually was talking about this in the group about addictions. People who stop addictions and or people who stop suffering when they've committed so much time and energy to those things. Oftentimes, where does it go? And so not all the time, but quite often you'll see people who like stop smoking and then they pick up another addiction, right? They go to something else. Um, so if we don't have, all this energy gets freed up. It's like, it's like kids that take a nap and all of a sudden now they have all this energy, but they're like stuck in the car. And so what happens when you have a kid who's ramped up on energy and he's stuck in the car for hours, right? It's unless you have a really unless you've done a really good job parenting, oftentimes there's that energy's got to go somewhere. And when we stop suppressing, when we stop censoring, when we let go of these addictions and stories that have held us captive for so long, or we've used to hold us captive for so long, if we don't have a place for that energy to go, not always, but there's a good possibility it's going to go back into the path where it's been. So it's like water, right? So after years and years, millennia, right? Rivers, they form this path. And then water goes somewhere else, rain. Well, what happens to that rain? Well, that rain's going to find where that path has been carved out. So these are our neural pathways. These are kind of like our habits, our energetic habits. And when you've got that entrenched for 40 years, and then all of a sudden you free up that energy from that dam, where's that energy? Where's that water wanting to go? Where that path has already been laid out. So if you start laying out another path for that water to go, it has a much better chance of being directed into that new energy, into that new direction. And so you can also use this to help you stop, right? If you have a vision that is more than just yourself, if you, in that same chapter, I believe I talk about what do you stand for, right? Your values, your principles. And if you have a vision that's big enough and high enough, it can help pull you out of those things. So there's times for myself where you guys and the readers of the book and my clients and the millions of other people out there that I have yet to meet, sometimes I use that to direct me and say, all right, this isn't just about me. So if I'm taking myself out, or I'm letting someone else take me out, whatever it is, where I find that I have a story, or I have suffering, or I have something that's going on. In the past, when I really didn't have much to live for, and I was, let's say, contemplating suicide, that stuff is just really easy to take me back there. But if I have something bigger than myself, that actually inspires me to show up when I normally wouldn't show up for myself. And so you start seeing as you mature, and if you look at some of the greatest art, a lot of religion, there's some distortions, but there's also a lot of glory. There's a lot of divine inspiration. There's a lot of beauty that's made in inspiration from this divine. And so having something beyond our stories, having beyond our egos, beyond our narcissistic images, beyond just ourselves, can also be a catalyst for overcoming those addictions and those stories.
Thank you for the detailed explanation, Andrew. So basically, you're saying that if we can help other people heal, we can heal as well.
I'm not quite sure I said that.
just summarizing in a sentence. But for me, it works that way because I'm helping out women heal, right?
Okay, yeah. So that's what you do for your career. Yeah.
Yeah. It for my side thing, right? As you know, so this helps me heal because I have breakthroughs. When I do so, I have, my consciousness gets uplifted when I help these people. So that's how it works for me. So that's why I summarize that way, that if I help some people to heal, like in my case, I'm healing, actually I'm healing myself or helping myself out. So that's why I summarize it
So
that way.
so this is a tricky, very, very tricky. This is a danger zone. Because if because I've done this, I've tried to get myself out of my suffering by trying to serve other people. And so it wasn't really pure. I had an agenda. I was there was it wasn't just pure, right? It wasn't just pure, I want to help people. It was maybe if I help people, I'll get out of my suffering. You feel the difference?
Yep.
And it definitely clouds it up. When I was running that, I really struggled. Business wasn't working very well. And it wasn't until I got my life figured out. I had the concepts, I had this work, very, I could do it well, but my life wasn't in order. And I was trying to get my life in order by trying to help other people. And there's something that works about that, and there's something that doesn't. And so, the thing that doesn't work is what I just said. The thing that does work is what we were both alluding to. So it's tricky. You have to really be aware. Are you it's almost like using them. And so this is where the feeling and energy is so important, because undoubtedly when you help other people, you're helping yourself, right? Every time I get on these calls I'm with a client, even when I read passages, even last time reading passages of my own book that I fucking wrote, I get something from it, right? My clients teach me, you guys teach me. It all moves me forward as well, right? Financially, but also energetically, but also emotionally. I learn, I grow, I have maturity. It helps me as well. But if my intention, if that's my agenda, then it clouds the water, right? Then the clients start to feel like, wait a minute, am I becoming the therapist here? Am I, who's helping who, right? In an unhealthy way. So this is why feeling is the key, because there's no other way to sort out the difference between having clients and you both benefiting from the call, and having clients where you both benefit from the call, but you're using it to help yourself, whether that's advance your ego, right? I've certainly know what it's like to improve my image, to bolster my confidence. When I first started, it's like, man, I'm fucking good, right? Because I felt insecure. Or, using praise from other people to lift myself up, to validate myself. So these are the specific things that you want to look for. If you're using your clients to validate yourself and things like that, that's where it's a no-go. But if by default of you showing up and wanting to be service of the world, because that's just what you love, and you would do it anyway, and you just happen to get more from that than you ever would by being a victim or narcissistic or selfish, right? Then that is totally great. Do you see how it's like very easy for us to label these things the same way, to use these words in the same way, and almost have very similar results and behaviors, but the feeling is off. There's a little agenda. There's a little something, right? There's a there's a fart in the air. There's a little. It's like it's all
Yes.
good, but there's a little. And so that
So,
feeling is going to help you sort that difference out.
so what question can I ask myself to determine where I'm coming from?
Great question. So when I'm in it, I go into the feeling. Am I telling the truth? So it's an orientation towards the truth. What's true here? Am I looking to get something from this? Um, am I, do I have an agenda? Is there, do I have a secondary gain? Are my intentions pure? So it doesn't mean that you're trying to be malicious. It doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong. It doesn't mean that you're bad or evil. It doesn't mean that if you have an agenda or you're manipulating, you're somehow monstrous. It's just really getting honest of like, I'm here to help you. I really am. And I'm looking for something out of this. Okay, that's more honest. Doesn't make it wrong. It's like, I try to share with people. It's like, just tell me the truth. Like, it's okay if there's an agenda. Let's talk about it and find it out. So maybe there's a need that I can help you meet. But we're scared, right? It's like we're afraid that if we just tell the truth, if we just put it all out there and say, I'm helping you because I'm, insecure, whatever it is. We're afraid we're going to be rejected. We don't necessarily live in a culture where that's normal conversation. Like I share these ways of communicating with a lot of people, and they're like, what fucking planet are you on where people talk like that? Like either that's so mean, I get that one a lot, right? Cruel, who do you think you are? Who talks like that? Nobody I know says these things. It's like, aren't you going to get rejected? Am I not? Am I not supposed to be like politically correct? Like we're not allowed to say those things. Like I have people like say things like, you're not allowed to say that. What do you mean I'm not allowed to? What do you mean? Who? Are you my parent? Even if my parents say that, like what? We literally, in America, at least, I know not all of you, but in America, we have this amazing thing, First Amendment in the Bill of Rights to our Constitution that says freedom of speech. It's a protection from tyranny. It's a protection from the masses. It's a protection from democracy. It's a protection from the government. It's not for the government to rule us. It's actually to prevent us from being tyrannized from the government. It's amazing. It is one of the most beautiful pieces of thing that has poured into humanity. Like throughout history, we have not been allowed to. If you would have shared these things, if you would have told the truth about your shadow, you would have burned at the stake. You would have been a witch. You would have been hung. People have. So remember, these things are safety mechanisms built into our ego, built into the culture, into the society to not step outside of these bounds. Otherwise, we will be annihilated. We will be rejected, ostracized, outcast, killed. So what we're doing in this work is very high level, moving past those fears, those cultural constraints, moving more into this mystical dimension. The founding fathers of America were plugged into some of these societies. There's all of this proof and evidence that they inherited very similar esoteric, metaphysical, spiritual, philosophical teachings, the same stuff that we're talking about here. And it's been a crazy ride, but it's brought about some really amazing things. Long-winded, but you can see that all of this is at play, that these principles, these things that we stand for, where this energy is going to go, being clear, being authentic, being willing to speak, to move past these safety zones of our ego. I was on a call. Was it with you, Elaine, or somebody else? Maybe not. I think it was a new client. It was a new client. And they were doing their embodiment assessment. And it was one of the coolest, most plain, visible things to see. And so they were doing their handshaking. The few of you that have done it, you know the handshaking. And I was saying, go bigger, right? Go bigger, bigger, bigger. And they got more and more intense, but in the same place, right? They weren't getting bigger. They got more and more intense here. And so it was this perfect, clear as day example of seeing the literal bounds of the story. So I say these things, right? I say the bounds of your story move in a new way. These things are not only allegorical, they are literal. This is why the movement in cinesomatics is so important and amazing, because it literally shows you the physical bounds that these stories and trauma keep you in, that keep us in. There's these cultural stories, beliefs, mythologies, familial mythologies. They literally constrain us. Eva was talking about, right, not censoring, being willing to share and speak these things that feel scary, right? So you're moving past the bounds of that fear of vulnerability, right? That terror. You're not only working the muscle of vulnerability, but of courage. And so by doing that, the bounds that fear, that story of being rejected or whatever it is expanding until it's gone, until you are all the way out everywhere. And so the movement work is just, it's just so amazing because these things aren't theoretical. These aren't simply mental constructs. They show up in the body. And if you can penetrate these in the body, if you can show up bigger in your body and penetrate those bounds with your body, you're going to penetrate those bounds of that story in your life, in your culture. So the willingness and the courage to do that and to have that integrity to look at ourselves and say, what is our agenda? What is our intention? What is our vision? Being honest with ourselves, being willing to look at these things that we may have thought were terrible, awful, unlovable, right? Because most of it's like, this is unlovable or unacceptable. Some of us have things where we feel it should be lovable, but we know the people around us won't accept it. Culture doesn't accept it. And to look at these things and be willing to expose them, to shine the light on them. At the end of my book, there's a Latin phrase, and this sentence is essentially the creed of this work. And it stands for, we go into the shadow to find the light of lights, right? It's not just love and light and rainbows. It's not just go into the shadow and dwell on it. It's not just go in the shadow and feel miserable. It's not get rid of the shadow. It's not bypass the shadow. It's not just levity and lightness and joy and happiness. It's the light of lights. It's the divine of the divine. It is the King of Kings, Lord of Lords, right? It's that true self. And in order to find that true self, we have to be willing to get uncompromisingly honest with this stuff, right? And I talk about in the book, uncompromisingly honest. Make truth the most important thing. And that will be your guiding path. That will have love in it. There will be unconditional love and joy and sorrow and grief and sadness and adventure and triumph and sorrow. But if you avoid the truth, there's going to be a lot of suffering. And so by be willing to tell the truth about ourselves, to see these things, we can get closer and closer to the true self. And one of the things that always gives me a chuckle, I have to laugh about it, is when people read the book and they think their true self is just their idealized self. I literally devote a whole, I literally devote a whole chapter to saying that's not what it is. And yet people will read it, and it's okay, and say, "Oh, the true self is who I really want to be." Right? It's me without my flaws. It's the perfect version of me. It's me without a shadow. And it's like, no, that's literally diametrically opposed to what we're talking about. And the person along that path is going to end up in a place very different than what I'm pointing to. I can't show it to you. I can't hand it to you. I can't say it. I can only point to it. And I know this because I've been that person on that path. And it led me to write that book, and it led me to write the chapter, Stop Fixing, Start Living, and all of this stuff.
Thank you very much, Andrew.
You're welcome.
Really, really useful. Really useful. Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you for the question, because what I've discovered with myself about how I work and how I take a little bit. Some of you know this. I can get on a roll. But one of the things that I do is I trust that your question, there's a voice that came through you that evoked a voice to come through me. That's going to evoke something through David and Megan and Joy and Hannah. Maybe it's something that feels good. Maybe it's something that doesn't. And if we can trust and surrender to that, it's like, I know I can talk. Okay. And if I can trust that and own it, say, all right, I'm going to talk. All right. Well, let's own this, and let's get inspired, and let's talk with inspiration, and let's lead that to somebody else. Let's lead that to David. It's going to inspire David in a way, right? Or Joy. Maybe they're going to say, shut up. And I'll say, okay. And then we learn. And then I learn. I say, okay, that's a boundary. All right, cool. I get to feel that. And then they get to feel that. And then we get to laugh. And then they get to talk. And I get to say, aha. And then they get to say, aha. Oh, you rascal. And then we both nod and laugh. And there's a great quote. I'm going to paraphrase this. But it's something like, when two Zen masters meet on the street, they need no introduction. A thief recognizes another thief.
That's so true.
Tell us, Megan.
Sorry, that's so true. I will find the one addict in any suburb, anywhere, and we just gravitate towards each other. It's and it's not even that they necessarily look like the stereotypical addict, but it just is. Like my parents used to live in the most safe, boring suburb, and at midnight on Wednesday night one week, I found the person who it's amazing. Absolutely amazing. May I offer a couple of thoughts on what was just said? I find it very difficult to jump into conversations and offer my bit. I tend to wait until I'm asked, which means I sort of never jump in, and I'm trying to change that. So I'm boldly going where I sort of don't tend to. About the energy, the release of energy. Two experiences. Years and years ago, I briefly stopped using, I don't know how or why, but it was one of those times where it was easy. And what happened was that from the day I stopped, for about 2 weeks, every single day, I was in a state of bliss. And I couldn't, like, those things that they say, spiritual masters, they need nothing, and they just walk around, words to that effect. I had that experience. I used to think that was bullshit, and it was, I can't even, I get goosebumps thinking about it. It was this state of just absolute contentment, bliss. And my life was no different from one day to the next. The only thing was I'd stopped. I was still having withdrawals and all that, crappy stuff. But somehow, for whatever reason, I was just okay with it all. And I'd just walk around the streets and look at everything, flowers, trees, people, and just be blissed out, like really total hippie bliss. And then what happened, I think around the 2-week mark, it just got too good. It got too good for too long. And to shut it down, I went and used. And that, returned me to my status quo. So that's the first thing. And I understand that. And that was kind of where I was back then. More recently, when I got out of jail some 5 years ago, it was very clear to me that if I returned to my old practices to support my drug habit, I would end up back in jail. And I'd learnt what I had to learn, from that jail experience. So I had wanted, so I continued using drugs, but I had wanted to use my story to help others for a long, long time. And I kind of put it out there to God, the universe, whatever, if that's the go, please put me on that path. And surprise, surprise, I was put on that path, and I started speaking. I presented at a conference. I had an idea for a website. I registered the domain. I've, written billions of words for that. I've had my ideas and everything so fertile, and I was really starting to get a reputation in a positive sense and opportunities galore. And something happened, and I pulled the plug internally. Somehow I pulled the plug. I suspect it's fear. Pretty sure it's fear. And bit by bit, I kind of let the things fall off. I started not showing up, self-sabotaging. This website idea, which is such a joy and passion of mine, that just, I haven't done one actual thing to actually get it. I've done everything but actually do one thing to actually make it real, very good at all that busy work, but not the real stuff. And I can feel it slipping through my fingers, I can feel this, because I very much understand that it's a reciprocal relationship between myself and God, universe, whatever, that I bravely confront the things that scare me. I grow, and I'm not rewarded, but in reciprocation, I go one step higher. And it's like this back and forth. And the reason I relapsed after 12 years of abstinence was because at 5 years, I had stopped confronting my fears. I started to live out of fear instead of out of courage, which I had been for the first 5 years. And exactly the same thing's happening with this, this path of mine. And the thought of, and it kills me. And also I discovered recently I can do art, and I got into that. And again, it started developing, and I started selling art, etc. And I've pulled the plug somewhere there as well. It's like the good feeling of all that. I don't know if I don't know what to do with it. I can't put it, but it's killing me that my using is going to fuck these things up, because it's fucking them up as we speak. And the more I begin to wobble, the more scared I get, and the more I just collapse in, and the more I hide instead. Like, we're having in December a drug summit in New South Wales. That was one of my it is if you're into drugs or talking about them. It was going to be, like an opportunity for me to, further my path. Now I'm so frozen and incompetent, I feel. So yes, definitely the energy gets liberated, and definitely a project is not a project, a purpose is necessary. And my, my website, etc., was such a phenomenal, the stuff that I can do on behalf of my advocacy and website is I can never do for myself. I speak assertively. I confront people gently. Me, the me in real life wouldn't say boo to a doormat, like I'm worse than a doormat. But on behalf of that, it's like it's the opposite of the I can't, I'm hopeless loser thing. It's like I enlarge, I get bigger and solider and braver, and I step aside, and it's just, okay, well, this conversation, what's the aim of it? And I say what needs to be said instead of I say what to please the person or make myself feel safe. It's such a glorious feeling, and the fear is fucking it. So yes, those were just the things that got evoked in me when we were talking. Thank you.
Wow, you've been waiting to share. Great. Thanks for sharing.
Sorry.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing. There was so much wisdom in what you just shared. Who here got something from what she just shared? Did anybody learn anything?
That's good. I'm glad. I'm really glad.
So,
but wisdom without action is it's all great. It means I sound all wise, but I'm here letting it fall through my hands. You know,
Yes. Yes, I understand. I understand. That's why there's more that's required. Yeah. It's yeah, it's one of these things that we have these stories. Maybe Hannah, you can talk about this, touch on this, where we think that it's like if we just like the wisdom isn't enough, the skill isn't enough. Like there's other things at play. These stories, these myths, these dysfunctions, these distortions. It's not just like we have a great heart and we can do so good for others. Like, unfortunately, that's not enough. There's other pieces that are required to make that happen. So I want to say one thing, and then maybe Hannah, if you want to share or not, whatever. So the biggest thing that I was gonna sorry, someone's hopping in here 45 minutes late. The biggest thing that I saw, what was giving me sort of a smile, was that you perfectly described what happens when somebody reaches the bounds of their mythology. Yeah. So what happened to you? There's multiple things that were happening, but without getting too much into feedback and therapy or anything here, is there's a mythology, and you it's probably unconscious for you, or else you would have spoken about it. And so what happened is you started expanding and you started feeling good and you started getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And you reached this spot. You reached this point that was the bounds of the story. And that was it. And so,
yep, absolutely.
Yep. And so for you, the thing was to dump it, was the self-sabotage. And so when we see that on people, I'm not sure if we have examples of this on the Cinesomatic website, but what happens usually is someone will literally throw the energy down. I'm gonna pause your video here until you sit, because it's kind of taking the energy. So once you get situated, you can turn your video back on, just because it's kind of pulling me out here. But thank you for joining us. So yeah, this bounds of the stories. Actually, if you watch, let's see, let me real quickly here.
The way it felt, Andrew, was like I opened my hands and the sand started falling through the hands, if we use the analogy of sand and energy. So it wasn't quite the throw down. It wasn't quite, I was sort of half trying to hang on to it, but I could tell that I was spreading my fingers and letting it pour out. And that sort of that sense of overwhelming hopelessness and loserness just came over me, and I wilted into the ground like a melted candle, if you want visual images.
Yeah. So what would happen if you closed your fingers and started being able to receive?
Hadn't even occurred to me until you mentioned it then. It was kind of like, it almost feels like a done deal.
No. Do it. But what does it feel like? Do it with your actual fingers and hands. Yeah.
I'm trying to get into it. I feel so melted into the floor that it's like it feels a bit beyond closing the fingers. I know that's bullshit. I know that's just a story, but in terms of the energy and being able to interact with you now, I'm too far melted into the floor at the moment.
Sure, fair enough. Yeah. So we would have some other things to do. Elaine knows she's on a journey of coming off the ocean floor and coming back up out of that. But yeah, so as an example of how Cinesomatics works, is your visuals are not just metaphors. When
Mm.
we have you move in your body, these are the literal things people do. It's just like everything's slipping through my fingers. And so it's like,
Yep.
okay, well, what happens if I usually don't tell someone what to do in the beginning because they needed, excuse me, they need to figure it out themselves. But in this demonstration, this example, usually the opposite of letting it slip through your fingers is like to grab onto it. It's like, what would happen if you grab on to everything that you were building? Now, that may not be the final step, right? Because you don't want to just only hold on to it. But it's probably better than letting everything you're doing slip away from you.
Mm.
And then what happens, right? Is like, oh, this feels weird. Oh, okay, I feel selfish. Oh, I feel like I don't deserve this. Oh, I feel stingy.
Exhausted. I feel
Okay, so
exhausted
you feel exhausted.
at the thought of grabbing and beginning again.
Well, notice you're adding the beginning again. It's just grabbing. So you see,
Oh yes, and the big. Sorry, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and the begin again. It's so much part of my narrative of I try, I stuff up. Oh God, have to begin again since I was 12. So the begin again. You're absolutely right. I'm not actually beginning again because it's not all gone to shit. Pardon the language. Yes, thank you. Sorry.
Well,
Had an epiphany there.
these stories are so powerful. We miss this stuff. And the great thing about, again,
Totally.
somatics is the body. It literally will tell us what to do. It's like, I feel like I'm letting it slip through my fingers. Well, grab it. Okay. Well, now, and I don't want to start over. Look, well, what's actually happening is you're not starting over. You're just grabbing the sand that's slipping through. And then it starts changing. Then we move through as that story unravels. It starts revealing the different acts and stages it plays upon, and you do it through the body, and it reveals all of it. It's like, oh, I can grab it. What do you mean I can grab it? What do you mean? Oh, I can stop. What do you mean I don't have to keep fighting? I can lay my sword and shield down. Okay, I lay that down. Oh, now I feel scared. I feel vulnerable. Oh, I feel a relief. So these things all play out, and there's so much data in this. So things that most people think are just your mannerisms and patterns of speech. It just revealed so much. I mean, there's so much here in what you just talked about and what we just discussed. Like, if you start actually implementing those, it's going to change. Yeah. So who's got, I know Hannah and Elaine, I see you guys chomping at the bit. Go ahead.
One thing that I know Andrew had told me is, when I was on the bottom of the ocean, and then I did rise up and I swam. He said I would probably go back down there, but
aren't I great?
But I really wouldn't be at the same place because I had already embodied something higher up. So even though I could say, oh, I'm back where I was, I have to start over, was starting from a different point, and that is encouraging too. And it sounds like that's what you're doing. You're starting from another point, even though it feels like you're starting over, but you know more, and
That's very true. That's very true. Like all that work hasn't gone anywhere. It's still in me, in my energy out in the ether. See, that's another thing I completely disregarded. It's that begin again from scratch, whereas it's not. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Thank
That was really helpful to me because, it's hard to go back down there and.
Well, and it's
absolutely.
You probably have like would you say exhausted, or what did you say? Tired?
Exhausted, yes.
Exhausted.
Myself exhausted, yes.
Yeah.
At the thought of beginning again in inverted commas.
That's part of the story, right? So it's like, oh,
so true.
More exhaustion.
How did I not see that?
Yeah,
how did I not see that?
Yeah, and so you're going to be filtering things this way, and then it's going to also recreate that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Hannah, you got all sorts of stuff here. The exhaustion. I mean, there's all sorts of ways that you can help out.
Yeah, there's so many things I could share. Let's see. Well, first I'll share I um I guess I had a story of that if I'm just a good person and I do the right thing and I'm holding the highest of intentions as I work and move through the world, then good things will come to me. Everything will work out. And that isn't true. And upon the discovery of that, I came into a lot of like I guess self-loathing for what felt like this naive part of myself that believed that that could be true. And then a lot of resentment for especially working in the music industry, feeling like I'm seeing other people reaching successes who I know are not necessarily holding the highest good and intentions of others.
Yeah.
Um, and then and then it also elicited a feeling of just like apathy and not caring, and anything I try is just going to be fucked now anyways.
Mm.
I don't want to play that game. And so then what is interesting is what was reflected in my movement is when I would give or offer or do, there was a lot of like dropping or like kind of leaving it and running away. That was really fascinating. Still working on finding a way to do that differently.
So what is that? So what does that reveal?
That I'm throwing away my gifts and what I'm offering, and I mean a lot of different things.
Yeah,
I
what
think
else?
I'm afraid of seeing people's response. I'm
Yep.
not hanging
So
around to
relate.
see if they want it or not. I'm just like, there it is, bye.
Yep. I so relate to that.
And then what happens is you can't receive anything
Right.
because you're
Yeah.
gone. You
Yeah.
know?
Or
So
I'm afraid it's going to be rejected. And so then I throw it and run, but then I never really let anything in. And then I can relate to that feeling of reaching the threshold of allowing joy and pleasure.
Mm.
You're like, wow, this is great. And all of a sudden you're like, and that's enough.
Yep.
And
Yep.
like, what is that switch that flips that just starts then creating chaos? And a lot of times I notice like myself in my like if I'm meditating or in a mindful practice and I get into a place of peace and like it can only go so far before then my mind comes in and is like, well, what about this? What about this? What about that? And it's yeah, there's a threshold point.
Very much. And for me, like, approaching the threshold, it's quite palpable. I could tell as I was approaching it, and I had this sinking feeling in my gut, and it was like, oh no, I can feel my momentum and my energy draining. I can feel me making excuses to myself, which I know I could feel it coming upon me, and yet felt powerless to
yeah, you said you're setting the whole thing up, you know. Yeah.
yes. Hang on. Unconsciously,
Yeah,
definitely.
sure. Yeah.
Because I really did not, the art and the advocacy stuff, they mean so much to me. And it almost feels like if I fuck these up, then really I've run out of, here we go again, I've run out of options.
Yeah.
That's the last, sort of my last attempt at a purposeful, worthy life where I'm not just a junkie
it's a good
that
story.
doesn't contribute.
Yeah, it's a good story.
I could feel myself begin to get into the whole
Yeah.
thing as I'm telling it to you. You know, Hannah, the giving thing, I call it the thrust and run. So when I give gifts, which is not
I like that.
often, I leave it until the last minute of our, say, coffee or catch up. And then I literally thrust at the person and literally buy and run, because seeing their reaction as they open it.
You're beautiful. Bye.
I can't bear that. So yes, the thrust and run. Thank you for what you said as well. Thank you.
Yeah, and they're also I have, I think, maybe share with you, like, in some way an association of having success with exhaustion. Like, I can't find success without going into exhaustion.
Meaning that's the price to pay, or that's the consequence of success is only possible if you exhaust yourself.
No, that's the path for her. That's the path. She exhaustion is the path for her.
Sorry,
It's the road. It's not the destination that happens.
Oh, I see. Yes.
I mean,
yes.
she's
Gotcha.
She's trying to exhaust herself to the success.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I say things that are a little weird to people. Like, I say it in these certain orders that seem off, but it's actually the secret to everything. Like in the equation of suffering in the book, it's like, I said those in a very specific order. I know it sounds weird, but if you understand, right, having problem solution, right? It's like if you have a solution, you know, you're going to be looking for a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So she thinks that's the road to get her to success is exhaustion.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that, and also the times that I've had the greatest success have been the times I've been the most exhausted and burned.
Exactly.
So it's both.
Yeah. Okay. Wow.
How many times have you been that successful without exhaustion?
Never.
Yeah, exactly. So you see, it's the path. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So for Hannah, right, what we're trying to help her with is finding a new way of moving through life that can get her even more success without the exhaustion.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But because that's all she's known, it's been really, really hard for her. Yeah, it's hard for all of us when we're only taught one way and nobody's showing us other ways. Now, the great thing about cinesomatics, I'm beating my drum here, but it's one of the few things. There's other things in different modalities, but it can actually show you. It can actually teach you. I have clients that come on and they don't have a reference point, like Darun last time, right? He didn't know how to move forward in his life. How did that show up? It showed up as him frozen, unable to move forward in this vision of a village, into the forest, into the woods. Okay, well, what does the body reveal? Well, if you really go with it, say, okay, well, how do you do something different? Well, you could walk backwards, you could walk side, you could walk forwards, you could fall on the floor, you could jump, right? There's probably dozens of different things you can do. For me, metaphorically, the most obvious is to take a step forward, right? Because that's the direction you want to go. You want to go forward. What do? Practically, right? You take a step forward. So what he did literally was take a step forward in the exercise, in the cinesomatics. And he took one step and it took him like 2 minutes to take that first step. And the next one was like 30 seconds. And the next one was like 5 seconds. And as he's in it, he's starting to take in the data, right? This is all symbolic, right? He's taking this in and it's informing him. And his body is literally teaching him the strategy, a new strategy, a different strategy on how he can move through life differently, right? It's teaching him courage. It's teaching him how to look around, having a vision, moving forward. So it is so cool watching people listening to the space and themselves and the feedback and actually discovering they have it within them, right? We hear these phrases, you have all the answers inside. It's so annoying and obnoxious when you don't fucking know the answer and you just want to be told. But it is so rewarding for people when they go through these movements and they discover these things for themselves. And it's like, oh my, what do you mean? What do you mean I can just take a step forward? And then that translate, like they've never gotten permission, right? Their parents didn't say, you're allowed to step forward in your life in a new direction. You can go there. You don't need permission. Leave the village, go on an adventure. No one told him he could ever do that. And so moving past these bounds with your body is going to teach you the equivalent, right? The practical thing in life that you need to do. How? Why is this possible? As above, so below. How you do one thing is how you do anything. So not only does this reveal through the body how you are showing up in your life, but through the body, you can change how you show up in your life. And it's not me telling you the right way. It's you discovering it for yourself. And you may take multiple iterations of doing it in ways that probably don't work. So, right, the sands, grasping, that's probably not the end product that's going to have you making millions of dollars and helping millions of people and having millions of units of joy and happiness and whatever, right? But it's a step. It's an important step. It's like we talked about on we were having this discussion in the school group of acknowledging it, owning like, I'm an addict, I'm an alcoholic. Great. It's the first step. It's an important step. But it's a step. It's not where you hang out. You know, it's like hanging out in that kiddie pool forever. It just turns into another story.
Thank you so much for all that. Everyone, thank you. That was awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah and Elaine, as well.
Very much.
Thank you.
Joy, were you about to say something a few minutes ago?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I was just gonna observe one piece was when I was listening to you guys talk about that is I was just kind of seeing like addictions over here, exhaustion's over here, like retreating or these movements of like pulling back, like those are over here, and then over here is like joy and peace and pleasure. And I think part of like what I've learned through a lot of this work is like behind the addiction is some kind of, or what can be behind the addiction is some kind of shadow, something that is distorted or out of relationship, but really is like your light as well, right? When you talk about your passion for your work and these things that you're doing, and also like kind of how consistently you go back to the addiction, to me, I'm almost hearing the same, it's like two sides of the same coin, the same energy of like, whatever I'm doing, I'm really in it. Like, and like, that's like it. So when it's turning into an addiction, it's like just this untapped potential and untapped resource. And then when it's turned towards, you know, a purpose or what you feel like driven to do, then it's sort of like showing its light side. I'm not seeing it.
Right. Yeah. It's well,
You know.
What you're saying is, if I may,
Yeah.
it sounds to me that this is a really great example of it's just energy, and we can direct it in one way or another way, and some ways are shadowy ways and some ways are light ways. And if you can stop the judgment and the rejection and go into it, as you said, and it's going to have resources for you, right? It's not that you like suppressing that and killing it off and burning it off and getting rid of it. You're going to lose those light resources that go along with it. Yeah. So it's like when we start doing that and start separating everything out and say, okay, all you bad people over there, go over there. We're going to gas you and kill you. It's like, we know what happens, right? When the world does that, right? Very bad things. And it's done in the name of you're bad, shadowy, dark. You're causing us all this pain. You must be annihilated. These are real things. This is important stuff that we have to talk about because there's happening. This isn't just history. These things are happening. And this is because, right, of our internal shadow that's unresolved that we project out into the world and we become righteous, right? If we're allowed to say, I'm a good person, you're a bad person, so I'm allowed to annihilate you, and I can arbitrarily say, excuse me, who's good and who's bad, right? Make it all subjective, really, really, really bad things start to happen. But when we go in and own our shadow and say, oh, you know what? I have the potential to murder. I have the potential to rape. I have the potential to steal. I have the potential to do all of these horrors. And I'm going to get into relationship with it so I can identify it and so I don't become that person. I'm going to own those qualities.
Well, how else are you compassionate? Like,
what was that?
How else are you compassionate towards others when they're, like that's what I've found is like, if I can be truthful about the potential for me to murder, then suddenly this great big righteous act of like, shut down all the murderers, like it just kind of falls flat because, that's me too. So what, I'm going to shut down myself?
You see how that can be a problem for societies.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so if there's not an underlining agreed upon moral and ethical way, things can get real bad because 8 billion people, even 1 million people, even 100 people aren't all going to be energetically on that same page of compassion. And this is why you had, right, 10 commandments, laws, all of these things come in. And when you have societies that start using compassion in the name, when they start doing horrific things in the name of compassion, you have things that are happening and have happened in the world. And so it's part of the war on psychedelics, plant medicines, right? Because they do that, right? They connect you with everything. You say, oh my God, why are we murdering everybody? Like, why are we, wait a minute, Wall Street, wait a minute, what? Like, oh, okay, wait, what? Oh, crap shit, wait. Oh, it's a game. Oh, okay. Well, the power structures, right? It would just like collapse all that. So they have to shut that down because they don't know how to relate to it, right? There's no ritual. There's no rite of passage. There's no integration of the shadow and that shamanic realm and that spiritual realm in the exoteric societies. It's just how it's always been, and it's probably how it always will be. And so you have the esoteric and mystery schools and societies and cults, the positive terminology of ancient cults. You have these places, groups like this, right, where you can discuss these things, where you can talk about these things and pierce that veil, right? Pierce that veil, wake up in a safe place that isn't going to say, oh my God, how can you have compassion for people that murder? Because that can be dangerous. And so what we're doing here is understanding that, right? It's like we are with fire, right? We are with water. We are with all this stuff. All of these things can be used for great evils and for great goods. And so understanding that the universe does have ethics, right? There is a in order to the universe. How do we know this? It's not because there's a big grandpa in the sky judging us, all right? It's because how does life work when everybody's stealing, murdering, lying, cheating, all of these things? How do people's lives work and society work when that's happening versus a place where people are telling the truth, they're being generous, they are genuinely sacrificial, right? They are believing in things above themselves. They are giving and generous. They are honest. They have integrity. There's vulnerability and intimacy, right? The truth. So like all of these principles that I talk about versus their counterparts, you map out the path of societies that go in either direction, and you get to decide which you'd rather live in. And nearly anybody that I meet would pick one of those. And so it tells us there's something inherently built in that truth, love, generosity, all these things that we're teaching here, that's the Tao. That's the will of God. That's the Holy Spirit. That's the laws of the universe, whatever it is. Because life gets better when ultimately, maybe not in the moment, but inevitably, life for all gets better in that direction versus the either. So it was interesting. I heard Jordan Peterson talking about something else he was talking about. But he said something like, one of the reasons anthropologists sort of hypothesize that one of the reasons why it's taken hundreds of thousands of years for us to get where we are, one of the reasons is we had to get past the eye for the eye. Oh, you killed my chief. I'm going to kill your chief, right? You burned my farm. I'm going to burn your farm. Vengeance, right? The lack of compassion. And, Jesus said, turning the cheek, whatever it is, whatever he said, that guy, that thing. And so that's that compassion that you were talking about has literally been one of the ways our entire civilization has been able to move forward. Because without it, we would just be seeking revenge on everybody for everything. So, great points.
Would that also be considered a stopping?
Stopping for what?
Somebody hit me, so I'm not going to hit them back. Like there's just
yes,
they don't
right.
do it back.
Yeah, right. So that energy is moving in a direction, and it wants to keep going, and you can be the one that says, "No, stop."
Wow.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, it's very hard. It's not necessarily compassion, but that's connected. That's a really good point. All right, so we're gonna wrap up here, but we have somebody new. Let's see. Are you still here?
Hello.
Hi. Yeah, you're more than welcome to come on. If you just want to introduce yourself, how you found me, and what you're looking for here, and then ask your question.
Yeah. So I'm Ayush Patel, and I'm a student at Penn State. And how did I find you? I found your book online. I was scrolling through Reddit, and one of the tweets that I saw was this book was really transformative. So I bought it on my iPad, and when I read the first page, I really understood what I felt. It is something that really all self-help book does not teach. So it's basically what you were saying is you start with confronting yourself and you get to the truth. And that is something that none of the self-help books that I read that preach that message. So that is what brought me to this that is how I was introduced to your work. And then I saw your website and I saw the school community. So, and you also said that you cannot go alone. You need help of people. So this is why I joined this community. I just sent you a message today and you accepted me in the community. So that is how I came to your work.
Well, thank you so much. It's good to have you here.
Thank you.
Yes, we want you here. We're in a little late, and the video was walking, so I hope you understand.
Yeah. I didn't know that the meeting was today. Otherwise, I would have joined early.
Oh, right. You just got in. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Well, I'm glad you made it.
Thank you.
So what's your question?
My question was, I just wanted to introduce myself and talk about, you said that you have to confront yourself, but what my question is, if you want to change all areas of your life, where do you start? Do you start with one area, or do you start with a specific behavior, something like that?
Oh, Hannah's smirking. Hannah wants to answer this. Yeah, I see you smirking. You're smirking over there in the dark.
Great question. Well, probably not what I did and try and fix everything all at once in the same second and then be mad when it doesn't happen.
Okay.
Don't do that.
So what did you do next?
Yeah, Hannah, what'd you do next?
Oh God. Introduce the concept of having grace for myself. Which
Yeah, in the face of this new element called feedback.
mhm.
Yeah, so getting reflected back, things that you've never seen reflected back to you before. How's that been for you, Hannah?
It's been very difficult for me. Yeah.
So how far are you in the book?
I just finished the first chapter. I just bought it yesterday, so
Oh wow,
it's
you're a spring chicken. You're new to all this. Okay, great.
yeah.
Probably all your questions are in there. So where do you start? One of the principles that I teach is how you do one thing is how you do everything. That was taught to me. And that was a defining principle that was taught to me and something that changed the course of my entire life. That one statement. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Once you start looking at yourself and you start looking at others, you start seeing yourself in others, and you see others in yourself. It becomes it becomes to a place where it doesn't matter. I'll have calls with clients, and they think we're going to be working on money stuff, and it ends up actually their money block actually has to do with intimacy in their sex life and their relationship. So yeah, it's and that's the one of the challenging parts, and it's also one of the amazing parts is that you can have a breakthrough in one area of your life in this work, and then it affects all areas of your life.
Yeah.
So it's very different than this systematic engineer. You need 1,000 steps to get to your ideal self, right? It's not. It's more. It's
Confusing.
more. Yeah. It's like journeying over here, and that leads you to the side quest that you get the sword that unlocks the gate to give you the key to actually get to where you wanted to go. But you had to go through all of that and level up to get there in the first place.
Yeah. When I was skimming through the book, I saw this, what you were trying to teach is try to begin changing some other area of your life. That is what one of the things that you said in the book.
Yeah, if you're like facing something that's stuck and block, well then focus on something else that's
yeah.
Yeah. You usually don't want to, if you've been banging your head on something for 20 years, probably be easier to start somewhere else.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but
and
go ahead.
yeah, you can go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say you're in a good spot.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And the other reason that bought me is when I read your book, it was not like some other self-help that you do this and your life will change in 10 days or something. I got the message from my intuition that this is a long process. It's not something that you will arrive very early. You have to confronting yourself is a long process. So you have to work on yourself. You have to confront yourself. That is only when change will happen. So that is what really brought me into this work.
Yeah, another way confronting works. Um, Play with trying on getting to know yourself.
How do I know myself?
Yeah, exactly. Great question. We'll find out next time.
Okay, next
Yeah.
time.
All right, guys. We're over time, but I wanted to give you some space to introduce yourself and come in.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. We'll call it there as we're over time. Thank you guys so much once again for sharing and being vulnerable and moving us all forward and yourselves. Ciao.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks.